Good morning.
Morning.
Hope everybody's had a great weekend. We want to welcome you to this week's episode of Family Jewels, and this week we're going to be talking about appraisals, something that a lot of people don't have and don't realize the importance of until it's too late.
Well, that or sometimes maybe they don't actually need one, but they think they need one.
True. Yes.
So it's sometimes there are pieces that are inherited, and somebody just wants to come in and know how much it is.
Or they bought something online and they wanted to know if they got a good deal. Or
yeah. So
yeah.
you know, those are more almost like kind of an ego thing, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, I want to make sure that they didn't get like screwed over on something, or they wanted to see how good of a deal they got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, there's three appraisals, or what we normally deal with are three different appraisals, and
Yeah.
one of them is insurance or replacement appraisal, and then there's basically an estate appraisal, and then a possibility of a resale appraisal.
Yeah.
Most people come in and they want to know what it's worth, and
That's kind of an open-ended question.
yeah.
Well,
And it sounds like a simple one to answer, but we almost need to know why you want to know what it's worth.
Yeah. Because that could vary depending on what application that is going to be used.
Why they want to know what
Yeah.
it's worth. You know, if you're doing, you know, the most common appraisal that we do is insurance,
Yeah.
and that's basically replacement estimate with like kind and
Quality. Yeah.
and
In new condition.
not necessarily.
In most cases it is.
Well,
but there's
because-
some, with watches and stuff like that, that might be a little bit different. But
You know, especially, you know, and since Colton brought up the watches, especially Rolexes.
Yeah.
You know, granted, to some degree, there's a lot of models of Rolexes that don't look like they've changed, you know, outsides, but actually a possibility that outsides have changed and maybe the insides have changed.
Yeah.
So to some degree, you know, like say an 80s model Submariner is not the same as
2000s.
yeah
Yeah.
Submariner. So depending, there's a possibility that that 80s model could maybe be a possibility more expensive than the 2000 model.
Depends on if it's like, big hairband or,
Yeah. So anyways, there's a lot of things to take into consideration, but for the most part, in a replacement estimate, we're doing basically if it was brand new.
Yes.
There's a few instances where that isn't into consideration, and another thing would be is maybe a vintage piece. Then we have to go into we have to kind of check out the estate market and kind of see if we can come up with like, kind, and quality.
if it's possible.
Right.
Or if there's any provenance with it.
Right.
If it was something that was a limited edition made by a big manufacturer, like a Van Cleef & Arpels piece or something like that, was maybe featured in something, those factors all come into consideration, because there's a lot of that stuff that you may be able to make it look like it, but it may not have, there's history and stuff involved in that, and maybe a certain craftsman that made a certain piece that we have to take into consideration.
And I'm sure the insurance companies just
don't care.
Just love that too. That
Yeah.
They're going to have to, like Jackie Kennedy owned these pearls at one time. So how are you going to come up with another set of pearls that Jackie Kennedy owned? I mean, that's where it gets to be a little bit trickier. We don't deal with that most of the time, but that does come up. Provenance does make a difference.
Now, there has been a couple instances with, especially with the manufacturer that we deal with, which is Oscar Heyman Brothers. What's really nice about them and some of these other bigger names is they actually serialize each piece. So we can actually, include that on the appraisal, and whenever they go to replace something like that, if they're not replacing it with the exact thing that's listed on there that you're paying for, then we and you have some ground to stand on by having those numbers there. And we've actually had that happen a few times where, a piece was either stolen or lost and needed to be replaced, and they did a like kind, but it was nowhere near what the original piece was. And because we had that detailed information on there, we actually was able to get an exact replacement from the original company.
And I guess, we're talking about different appraisals, but I guess as far as our approach to doing that appraisal, no matter what kind it is, we basically go in there and we verify quality of metals, we measure, grade,
Yeah.
and estimate value of stones. We don't remove anything unless
It's requested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the most part, everything is done as is. On an insurance appraisal, to some degree, condition is not as important.
Yeah, somewhat irrelevant actually, because they're going to have to, you're not going to insure your car and have somebody steal it and say, oh well, when the insurance comes and does that, well, that fender needs to be crumpled, over here a little bit,
Yeah.
and
But so
the back glass was broken out, so.
But at the same time, if there are condition issues, those will be noted on the appraisal and stuff. So,
But it is good to have those for insurance, especially. Kind of rule of thumb is, especially if you have homeowners or renters insurance, most of those policies are only going to cover up to $1,500, kind of under a blanket policy. So pieces that
or there's going to be a limit.
Yeah.
And most of the time,
pieces that are valued more than that, we highly recommend getting an appraisal, an insurance appraisal, and usually most of those companies want you to update those every 3 years to keep them current.
and a little of that kind of depends on volatility of the jewelry market.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it where, we've had to do appraisals like every other year, 2-year period.
Yeah.
But, and that was kind of back whenever gold was fluctuating a lot more than what it is now. Things are a lot more stable than what they have been.
No.
The other thing is, since we're talking about insurance appraisals, we run into an instance here where we had a customer come in that had, I think it was a watch that had been, I don't remember if it was stolen or lost, but his insurance policy was tied to, or the deduction was tied to the value of his home.
Yeah. So his deductible for anything that happened, whether it was his roof or losing a piece of jewelry, since his jewelry was on it, they had to pay that deductible first. And normally,
that deductible was in consideration of what was going to be replacement.
Yeah, so it was like 2% of his home value, which
his home was $500,000, and the watch was, I think a little over $10,000. So actually,
he would have still had to pay out of pocket and not been able to cover it.
Yeah, so it was actually probably almost a break-even thing. If he turned it into the insurance company, he wasn't going to get much, because his deductible was going to absorb almost the whole loss.
Yeah.
So, one of those things is you need to, if we're doing an insurance appraisal, you need to find out how that piece is going to be replaced. And for the most part, insurance companies, everybody thinks that, well, I got the insurance policy that, they're going to replace this the way I want it replaced. But
no.
Once that claim happens, the that option of how it's going to be replaced or what it's going to be replaced
Falls on
with.
the insurance company.
Yeah.
Not
you.
you.
And some
Yeah.
people think that if I lost, say, a $10,000 ring, they're just going to give me $10,000 cash and I'm going to go out there and
Nope.
and replace it. And very seldom does an insurance company cash out. Is
Yeah.
kind of what we would call that.
Hey, John. Good to see you. We got
So-
somebody joining from India. Ooh.
Is that where he's at? Well, he could
I think
be
you're
in
in-
California, couldn't he?
I don't know.
Okay.
John, you have to comment on there where you guys are at right now.
So, but anyways, you need to find out what the insurance coverage covers. You
Yep.
know, and I'm going to bring up an instance of some things that maybe are not covered by insurance companies, but you think they probably should.
Yeah.
And probably the one that's probably most people don't ask about or think about is what's called mysterious disappearance.
Yeah.
So let's say that you just misplaced it, and now you've misplaced it for a year. So the insurance company would call that mysterious disappearance because you can't prove that it was stolen. You know,
Yep.
don't have a police record or something like that.
And see, now that's even a bigger deal because, you know, for those insurance companies to replace something that was stolen, you basically have to prove theft, which that could be very difficult to do, especially if it's one of those deals where, you know, maybe you left the door unlocked in your house and that was the only thing they took or something. The insurance company's going to go, well, how do you know that your house was broken into? Or you leave your car unlocked.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's-
it gets a little bit more difficult.
But anyways, there are a lot of, say, homeowner riders that maybe don't cover mysterious disappearance.
Yeah.
So that'd be something whenever you're getting ready to do this, if you're doing an insurance or getting an insurance appraisal or going to insure your jewelry, is find out what that coverage covers.
Yeah.
Another thing is I know that there are insurance companies out there that cover damage. So it'd be similar to like you get in car insurance. So you know you back into
A light pole or
yeah,
something.
that's not covered under your warranty. And similar if you get your
Ring caught in a
car
door
door or something like
and
that.
knock the stone out or break it or something like that. That's
Yeah.
not covered under warranty either, so it would fall on your insurance or you out of pocket.
Right. So there are insurances that are done for jewelry that actually cover repair.
And mysterious disappearance.
Right. And there's a possibility that maybe they cover one and not the other. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things you need to kind of check.
Yeah, just be very diligent in your search on your insurance. Pretty much check off all those boxes that you think might be a possibility. So replacement, repair, mysterious disappearance, theft, you know, pretty much anything that you could think of. And then kind of compare that to some of those others out there.
Yeah, and those rates that they charge for insurance are going to be pretty much, it's kind of one of those things you kind of get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you've got a deductible or a higher deductible maybe than another insurance company, those rates are probably going to be, you know, less, or there's going to be a difference.
The other thing to really keep in consideration, we kind of touched on a little bit, was deductibles. Be really aware of what your deductibles are because, like with this guy with the watch, I mean, he really didn't know. He thought that he was just going to be able to get it covered, but he didn't realize that that deductible actually fell in place on items that were covered under his policy and not just his home. So whenever you go and shop those different insurances to either put on as a rider for homeowners or renters, check to see what those deductibles apply to and how much they are. Because I know that there's some of the jewelry insurances out there that they have a zero deductible on them.
Right.
And so theft, loss, mysterious disappearance, repairs, everything, it doesn't matter, wouldn't cost you anything out of pocket. You know, and a lot of times especially with those jewelry ones, they're also going to know who to take that to either get it replaced or repaired, and basically a way to get it back in your hands or on your hand and wearable again. I'll let you talk.
Okay. So I think we've kind of covered the insurance one. You know, if you guys have some questions or something like that, you know, we can maybe address those later. But the next appraisal that we probably do, the next two, I guess, are by far less of what we do than than the insurance one. One of those is an estate appraisal. An estate appraisal is covering a possibility of pieces that are going to be inherited or that are part of an estate.
That needs to be kind of reconciled or
And
sold
you know,
off.
and it may be one of those things where those things, whenever the appraisal is going to be done, are not actually going to be disposed of or whatever. So they may do it for to establish a value within a trust or something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, on that one, we do take into consideration more the condition of the pieces. And, you know, we're probably going to note, you know, wear and things on there where we may not as much on an insurance appraisal.
Yeah.
The other thing is we probably do more of what's called a fair market value. So we're not going to be doing, for the most part, that value is probably not going to be as high as what the replacement or retail value would be. A little bit kind of depends. I mean, there's possibilities that those values for an estate appraisal and a replacement appraisal could be the same.
Yeah.
Probably not going to ever be, I can't think of a time when it would be more, but could be a possibility of the same.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, fair market value is kind of a deal where they say, you know, what a willing buyer and a willing seller would agree at, and not basically a forced sale.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes that estate appraisal could be a little bit time constrictive. If that, you know, if we know that ahead of time or whatever, then that may enter into how we value that estate appraisal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it may be one of those deals, like if it's basically like a court-ordered sale or something like that, where they have a limited amount of time to, I guess, dispose or resell those pieces, that will come into consideration and somewhat hurt that value a little bit.
Yeah, and then we're probably getting a little
expedite that
bit
sale.
away from the fair market value
Yeah.
because, you know, we have a time consideration there or something.
Which is actually our third appraisal is the resale,
Right.
or the fair market.
And again, on resale, again, that's that fair market. At times, for sure, we have to take into condition.
Yeah.
You know, there are some things that have been worn long enough that they're almost worn in two.
Or they've had lots of repair done to them.
We never see anything like that come into the
Yeah.
except last week maybe.
But it's kind of like doing an appraisal on a used car. You can't value it at what it costs coming off the lot. So you've got to take into consideration, are there any repairs that need to be done? Is it, I guess, in drivable or wearable condition? Things like that. So it's something that we definitely have to consider whenever presenting a resale value.
So on the resale, that's probably a little more. We also have to take into consideration, you know, is this piece something that's saleable at the time? And I kind of mean almost like, well, let's take for instance, you know, for the most part, what we're selling now as far as metal is, you know, pretty much almost all white gold. You know, we'll have customers that come in to possibly wanting to sell a piece to us or thinking about reselling it themselves or whatever, and it's in yellow gold. That market is a little less. I mean, there are less people out there looking for yellow gold than what there is white gold. So we have to take that into consideration. Again, so we would take into consideration, the condition of the piece, and then a possibility, on that resale is we'll actually do repair work on an item before it's going to be resold. So again, then that's actually going to up the value of that piece. Or we may say, this needs to be done, but I don't know that doing that is going to help the value that much. It maybe cost you more to do that than what it's worth for as far as resale. But those are considerations we have to take into account. But all of those appraisals, we basically have to do the same thing. We have to, identify metals, identify stones, and figure out quality grades. And we, like I said, everything except for the insurance appraisal, we basically have to do that, figure out condition. But by far, what we normally do are insurance appraisals. So I think we're kind of getting busy here. We've kind of covered everything. The appraisals do take a little bit of time, and how we do this here is we have a full description of that piece. A lot of times with customers, it seems like after we do that appraisal, they actually know more about that piece of jewelry than they did whenever they bought it, which that's sometimes a sad situation, I guess. But anyways, we do that description, then we also take a picture. So you can kind of, it's a little easier for people to identify things than just from that description. Sometimes, you describe, say, an invisible setting or something like that. People really don't understand what that is, but if you have a picture, it kind of goes a little bit further to identify that piece. Also, on insurance or any of the appraisals, if they're doing like kind, if you have a picture, it's probably a little bit easier to figure out what that design and that piece actually looks like rather than trying to do it from a description. So again, I just want to, tell you that, we're at corner of Alameda and Everhart, and telephone number is 361-991-7565. And we've kind of lost the host. I think he's busy with a customer or whatever, but I want to thank you for tuning in, and if you have some questions about appraisals of any kind, just give us a call at 361-991-7565 or come by and see us. Thank you.